will plant that seed of doubt. But even if it doesn't, you can be proud knowing that you've represented your side as best as you can, and you can try to do it better in the future. Just to wrap it up, I would say the most important thing is to really get that team aspect, that we're working together, that I really want to understand you. I don't just want to prove you wrong. Even if your conclusions are something that just makes me furious, I want to know where you're coming from. I want to know how you get to these ridiculous places. And once I understand that, then we can have an actual productive conversation, and it can even be fun. So, yeah, I guess I'll wrap it up. Any questions? Yeah.
Who's the toughest combatant you've had? For me, it's been the anti-fluoridationists.
Actually, the most, the hardest opponent for me has always been my brother, who's also an atheist, also a skeptic. I see you, Jeff. What are you doing?
I can do infinite shit.
Really, I credit him a lot with how my critical thinking skills have developed. He's 2 years older than me. He was the first to go to college. And we basically went through the same deconversion process. And a lot of that was just going back and forth with each other. We would disagree on one small thing. But both of us are, we're best friends. And so we were willing to grant points. We were willing to see where the other person is coming from, and we were willing to admit we were wrong. And that was extremely helpful for the both of us. But we still argue. I mean, we agree on so many political positions, and religious positions, and philosophical positions, but we still have that give and take, and that's really one of the most valuable things that I've ever had. Yeah.
I use a fairly simple modus ponens argument to deal with the creation and young earth creation, and I've been doing it effectively for quite some time. I noticed that one of the following speakers is going to be offering some criticism of classical logic.
That's right.
I lose my mind when I get that deep into the philosophy and logic side of it. Can you make sense out of his criticism of the modus ponens claim to validity?
You know, I actually do not know what his criticism is of that. I know some of his more general criticisms about classical so here's one that he's going to be talking about, for example. So you have an argument with one premise. And then you have a conclusion. So it is raining and it is not raining, therefore God exists. And this is a valid argument using classical logic, because the first premise is a contradiction, and everything follows from a contradiction, because it can never be the case that this is true and this is false, and that possibility is what makes it invalid. So I know that's one thing that he's going to be talking about as a failing of classical logic, because we would not want to say intuitively that this is a valid argument. It doesn't seem to follow from the fact that it is raining and it is not raining that God exists. Jeff, you had a question?
Oh yeah, back to sort of arguing concept. I was wondering, with different techniques of arguing, what your favorite way is to kind of slow them down. The one I'm thinking of is the gish gallop. I get that a lot with 9/11 conspiratorial people. They want to go, well, it couldn't have been this because of that. Oh, it couldn't have been that because of it, right?
Right.
So how would you deal with the gish gallop?
That's a really good point, because people do, especially if they're not trained in debate and if they're not really looking to be a team player, then they want to rush you through to their conclusion. And the best way I found, this goes back to Socrates, is just questioning. Why do you think this? Why do you think that? And sometimes the arguments I'm in are just questions, and it doesn't seem to go anywhere. But sometimes they trip themselves up. And they realize that, you know, I've made two contradictory statements here. So I found that asking questions is really the best way to get at the root of what they're saying and making them slow down and think about it. And of course, sometimes that doesn't even work. So.
Okay.
There's not too many Socrates around.
No.
Do you ever get skeptical about skepticism?
Skeptical about skepticism. Well, skepticism is skepticism as the skeptics community has construed it, is a very strong epistemological position. And epistemology, just for those of you who don't know, is the study of how we know things. So skepticism is a position saying that we know things through empirical evidence and through drawing logical conclusions from the facts. And that is a fairly strong epistemological position, and there are critiques of that, some pretty strong critiques. And so, reading those, it does make me wonder a little bit. It makes me feel a little uncomfortable because they are really, well put arguments. But ultimately, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm going to be a skeptic.
Right, that just means you're a good skeptic, right? Questioning skepticism.
That's sort of a second order skeptic.
The regression.
Exactly.
Do you know that you don't know?
See, this is why I didn't want any of these philosophy students to name my talk.
Answer.
Do I know that I don't know? Yes, I know that I don't know a whole lot of things. I'm not even sure that I know anything, really, depending on how you conceive know. Is it absolute certainty, or is it probable deduction?
You could be agnostic about your lack of knowledge.
Yes, I could, definitely. That's not excluded by my skeptic worldview.
And you can't argue with anyone who doesn't accept the validity of logic.
It's true. If somebody says, and sometimes it's really hard, and I'll get to your question in just a second, Michael. Sometimes it's really hard. So the first part of the class that I teach is recognizing the validity of arguments like this. And it's difficult for some people to see why this is valid. If P, then Q, and we have P, Q follows. And it's just some people don't get it. You can do example after example, and it just won't follow. And so those people especially are very difficult to argue with, because even if they have a logical inconsistency, you can't show it to them.
That's the modus ponens I was referring to.
Yeah, this is the modus ponens. They have even more trouble with the modus tollens.
And the preachers I listen to have the saying, no one turns on logic until logic turns on them. And when you present certain things in this simple format, my experience, they'll turn on the logic.
Yeah.
Because they can't handle the argument.
Right. No, absolutely. For some people, I've had people say this to me. You're just making it into math. Logic math is built on logic, so yes, it is going back. So I don't really know why that's an objection, really. But anyways, Michael, you had a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Like being a former like Christian yourself, do you find yourself being more critical of people with like fundamentalist Christians than like somebody who's never been a Christian before would be? Or
What I really, my true enemy is dogma and ideology, and you can be a dogmatic and ideological atheist. Although my ethical beliefs lead me to really focus on those beliefs that lead to poor consequences. So if you're a fundamentalist about homosexuality, it's absolutely wrong. Homosexuals can't have rights. That's when I'll get angry. But if you're just, if you're a Christian, but you're generally skeptical, you have, reasonable political positions, then that doesn't really make me angry. It used to, when I was, first coming out as an atheist, and I was like, wow, religion is so wrong and stupid. This cannot, how can anybody think this? But in recent years, it's just been mostly about getting the bad consequences out of society, because those are really what we're concerned about, and we have to prioritize somewhere. So,
okay, thanks.
Michael's actually in my intro-logic class. Any other questions?
Yeah, you can call me Michael. Nobody ever calls me Michael unless I'm in trouble, so. I get
Well,
a
you
little
signed your
nervous whenever
papers,
it's-
Michael, so. Yeah, oh, another thing that I forgot to bring up because my presentation cut off halfway through, is sometimes it's better to grant the premises of your opponent's argument. And I can think of an example. One time my brother and my dad were arguing about, my dad's a Christian and my brother's not, about a case of genocide in the Bible, and I can't remember which exactly it was because there's quite a few, but Josiah, my brother, was really disturbed that God ordered his people to murder every man, woman, and child. And he's like, okay, even if you murdered every adult, why would you murder children? And my dad's argument was that this was a really evil society and they had to just purge the entire ideas so that the spirit of evil would be passed on to their children, and they had to wipe that out at the start. So it was just a necessary sacrifice. And then the argument turned to whether or not these group of people were really evil based on archaeological evidence and whether they were Baal worshippers that put their children on fiery altars and that sort of thing. So they were debating about that. But what I found really wound the discussion up better was saying, okay, I'll grant you that they were the scum of the earth. They put their babies on altars, but how does it follow from that they should have killed the babies? Where is the spirit of evil that's being passed down to their children? How can you really defend infanticide? Even if you could defend, the wiping out every adult, how does that really work with children? So that actually made the discussion a lot more productive, granting, even this implausible premise that they were just killing each other right and left, because that's just not how society is. All right. Any last questions? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.